The wind smelled different that morning, like something misplaced from a dream, cooler, quieter, almost watchful. Elias stirred in bed, uncertain whether he'd been sleeping or suspended in something deeper. Time had begun to blur for him in recent months, not in the usual way days bleed together when one is bored or numb, but in sharp, sudden tears in the fabric of his memory. Like yesterday, he remembered finishing a book he'd never bought, the scent of old pages lingering even though the shelves in his study showed no trace of it. He sat up slowly, glancing at the clock on the wall. 7:42 a.m. Always 7:42. He could swear it had said the same thing yesterday. His phone blinked beside the bed, notifications, reminders, all the clutter of the modern mind. But none of them felt like they belonged to him. He scrolled through emails that referenced meetings he didn't attend, people he didn't recall knowing, conversations he felt only half a part of. Elias had never believed in time travel, not really. It was a trope, a convenience in stories to resolve paradoxes or create them. But this wasn't time travel, not in the cinematic sense of stepping into a machine and spinning dials. This was more subtle, like stepping into your own house and finding the furniture rearranged just enough to make you doubt your memory. The first real moment of panic had come a week ago at least. He thought it was a week ago when he ran into his neighbor outside. Martha, kind and aging, usually wore purple gloves and fed the stray cats. But on that morning, she didn't recognize him. Not in the awkward, half-hearted way people forget acquaintances, but with full, blank eyes. "Do you live nearby?" she asked, holding her mail like a shield. He had laughed it off. "I've lived next door for 3 years." She shook her head. "I think you're mistaken. I've been here 15 years, and I remember you." Elias told himself it was just confusion. Maybe early dementia, maybe she mistook him for someone else. But as he walked back inside, he saw the brass number on his door. 1427. It had always been 1423. He stared at it for a long time. And now, each morning, he woke with that same unease. His apartment still smelled like the incense he favored, still had the creaky floorboard in the kitchen, still held the same plants by the window. But something was different every day: a new book, a missing shirt, a bruise he couldn't explain. He began to write things down. Not journaling, not quite just observations. April 4th, my keys were in the fridge. I've never done that before. April 6th, I have a scar on my wrist I don't remember getting. April 8th, my therapist said we've never met before. That last one had rattled him. She had the same office, the same degrees on the wall, the same quiet voice. But she looked at him with polite concern when he walked in and said, "Good to see you again." She replied, "I'm sorry, have we met?" He began recording his sessions after that, not because he thought she was lying, but because he had to prove to himself he wasn't. Yet each time he played the recordings, they sounded different. Sometimes her voice changed, sometimes the entire conversation seemed altered. He tried to explain this to her, week after week, but each time it was like starting over. The world had become unstuck, but only for him. At first, he thought he was going mad. He googled memory loss, dissociation, temporal lobe epilepsy. He read accounts of Mandela effects, parallel worlds, multiverse theories. Some stories sounded too familiar: people remembering brand names wrong, celebrities dying twice, logos shifting. But those were minor, easily dismissed as mass misremembering. What he was experiencing felt deeper. Personal. Intentional. One night, he dreamed of a streetlight blinking in Morse code. He didn't know Morse, but he woke with a phrase in his head, "You're not the only one." Elias began to notice others. Just glimpses. People who paused in the street like they'd walked into a scene out of sync. A woman on the subway staring at her own hands like they didn't belong to her. A man arguing with a cab driver, insisting the city was named something else entirely. He started frequenting libraries, forums, hidden corners of the internet. In scattered threads and half-remembered blogs, he saw the same words repeated over and over: fragments, anchor points, reset nodes. There was no manual. No instruction. Only cryptic anecdotes and half-mad poetry. Still, he began to piece something together. Time wasn't a straight line, nor a loop. It was a field. A living thing, rippling, shifting, reacting. Some events were fixed immutable landmarks, but everything else could be bent. The mind, however, struggled to follow. Most people moved through shifts without noticing. But some, for reasons unknown, remembered. Or rather, they noticed the seams. Elias believed he had become one of them, a seer, as one website had called it. Not a prophet, not supernatural. Just someone who could perceive the changes, the quiet edits in the universal manuscript. Some warned that continuing to notice could destabilize a person. That the mind protected itself through amnesia and rationalization. That pushing too far could break something fundamental. He didn't stop. The more he noticed, the more frequent the changes became. His handwriting altered between days. His reflection seemed off by subtle degrees: a different hairline, an unfamiliar mole. One morning he woke to find the city's skyline altered. The tower that had stood downtown was gone, replaced by a spire he'd never seen. No one else noticed. What truly shook him, though, was a photograph. In a dusty box of old keepsakes, he found a picture of himself standing beside a woman with green eyes, laughing, holding hands. The back was labeled Clara, 2017. But he didn't know a Clara. He stared at it for hours, willing the memory to return. That night, he dreamed of her, a park bench, her hand in his, the scent of rain. He woke with tears on his face. Over the next few days, memories of Clara began to surface. Not like imagination, but like doors creaking open in a long abandoned hallway. Her laugh. The way she'd fall asleep during movies. Her scent, lavender and something citrusy. They overwhelmed him. The grief was real, physical. But when he asked friends, none remembered her. When he checked old social media posts, there were gaps, strange absences. Photos of him smiling alone in places he knew they'd visited together. It was as if she had been edited out. That was when Elias stopped trying to fix things. He started trying to find her. Every day, he mapped the changes. Looked for patterns. He became fluent in the language of alterations: when the air felt thicker, when background noise hummed at the wrong frequency, when time paused mid-step. He learned to anchor himself. Certain objects helped, like a watch his grandfather gave him, a particular poem. They acted like roots in shifting soil. Then came the day he heard her voice. He was in a bookstore downtown, one he didn't remember being there before. A bell chimed softly as he entered, and over the low hum of music, he heard it, Elias. He turned, heart thundering, but saw only rows of books and a sleepy cashier. He almost let it go, but then he spotted it. A leather-bound journal, unmarked, resting on a shelf with no price tag. Inside were pages filled with looping handwriting. His handwriting. But he hadn't written them yet. The entries were dated 2 months into the future. They described dreams, searches, memories of Clara. The last page simply said, "Your clothes." Keep following the echoes. He bought the journal. Or tried to. The cashier looked confused. "We don't sell that." Still, she let him take it. As if some part of her knew. Time continued to fold and shimmer around him. Days lost their order. Sometimes he woke to winter snow, sometimes to spring blossoms. But always, there was the journal. And always, the sense of Clara near, flickering at the edges of the world. One night, he stood on the roof of his building, the wind cold against his skin. He looked out at a city that no longer stayed still. Lights changed color. Stars rearranged. He whispered her name into the sky. And for a moment, time stood still. She was there. Not beside him but in front of him. Across the street, across the years, in another version of the world. He saw her as if through glass, walking, laughing, brushing hair from her face. She turned, as though she felt him. Their eyes met across timelines. And she smiled. Then, everything shattered. Colors inverted. The air rippled. He fell to his knees, dizzy. When he looked again, she was gone. But the journal had changed. A new entry had appeared, in unfamiliar script. The timelines remember what we forget. Keep choosing love. It binds the fragments. Elias closed the book. He didn't know what he was anymore, a traveler, a glitch, a remnant. But he knew this, Clara was real. And some part of her still walked the shifting paths of time. As long as he remembered, as long as he kept choosing her, there was hope. Time would bend again. It always did. And next time, he'd be ready. The world felt quieter in the weeks that followed. Not calmer, no, calmness implied safety, but quieter in that ominous way a forest holds its breath before a storm. Elias moved through it with the careful grace of someone unsure of what reality might be beneath his feet. He began noticing pauses, gaps between moments, like the universe inhaled but forgot to exhale. Birds frozen mid-wing beat. Cars on the road with no sound. Conversations in the background repeating a second too long. And in those gaps, sometimes, he saw traces, handprints on glass that wasn't there. A flash of green eyes in a shop window, gone before he could blink. He thought he was hallucinating. But the journal never contradicted him. It changed when he did, pages rewritten overnight, margins annotated in handwriting that wasn't quite his. Then one morning, the entry read, "She left a key. The red door. 9th and Blake. Noon." He almost didn't go. It felt like a test, and he had failed so many already. What if it was another loop, another version of the same unanswered question? But something about it felt anchored, not like the dreams or slips, but solid. So he went. 9th and Blake was a stretch of old town, mostly forgotten buildings and peeling murals. He found the red door easily. It looked as if it hadn't been opened in years. At noon, precisely, it creaked open on its own. Inside was a small room filled with clocks. Dozens old, new, digital, analog, each ticking on its own rhythm. Time split and staggered. On the far wall, a mirror reflected not his face, but Clara's. She was looking down, reading something. When she looked up, she didn't seem surprised. "Elias," she whispered. Her lips moved with the mirror, but no sound came. He reached out. His hand met cold glass. She did the same. And then, just before the mirror fogged, she held up a card. A small white square with a number, 4286. The mirror darkened. All the clocks stopped. He stumbled out of the room. That night, the number haunted him. He scrawled it over and over in the journal, until he fell asleep with the pen still in hand. He dreamed of the number, a code, a sequence, a song. He saw her again, standing at a terminal of light, typing the digits slowly. When she turned, she said only one thing: this one might work. The next day, everything was gone. The red door. The building. The clocks. He stood on the sidewalk, numb, as if the world had rewritten itself again while he was sleeping. And then the realization crept in, it had. Each timeline, each shift, it was a chance. Not a guarantee. Just a chance. Like a coin flipped between realities, but what he didn't yet understand was what decided which version stuck. Was it him, his choices, his beliefs? He began experimenting. Keeping himself in a heightened state of awareness. Eating the same meals. Wearing the same clothes. Trying to reduce chaos, to become a fixed point. Some nights, it seemed to help. He would wake and recognize the world as one he had seen before. Other nights, it was chaos all over again, different address, new scars, new newspapers with headlines he didn't recognize. Still, the number remained. He found it carved into the bark of a tree in the park, printed on a flyer in a cafe he hadn't entered before. Scribbled in the corner of a painting at a gallery. 4286, always waiting. Then, one night, he saw her again, not a dream, not a reflection. She was there, across the station platform, standing as if she'd always belonged there. Wearing a red scarf, just like the one she had in the photo. She looked at him, truly looked, and time stopped. He stepped forward. So did she. And the lights flickered. It was subtle at first, a single overhead bulb flashing once. But then the whole platform began to vibrate. Shapes flickered in and out of view. Signs in different languages. People shifting clothing between blinks. Elias grabbed the handrail to stay upright. Clara did not blink. Her eyes never left his. And then he saw her mouth move, say it. He didn't understand at first. Then he realized she meant the number. 4286. The world snapped. He fell. Not physically, his body didn't move, but he fell. Like a tethered consciousness yanked through glass and air and water. Every timeline he'd ever brushed against rushed past him in a flood of sensation. He saw himself at age 12, never having left his hometown. At 23, married to someone else. At 30, dying in a hospital. At 50, living in a cabin by a frozen lake. And then, still falling, he saw her. Again and again. In every timeline, Clara appeared, but sometimes not as a lover. Sometimes she was a stranger on a train. A doctor in a hospital. A ghost at the edge of a childhood dream. She was the constant. The anchor. And then, stillness. He opened his eyes to the sound of wind through trees. Sunlight dappled the room through sheer curtains. A room he didn't recognize, but that smelled like her lavender and citrus. The bed beside him was warm. A cup of tea steamed on the nightstand. And then she walked in, barefoot, hair tousled, wearing his shirt. "You slept in again," she said, smiling like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You always do after a reset." He sat up slowly. "Is this real?" She tilted her head. "Does it feel real?" He looked at his hands. No scars he didn't remember. No mirror inconsistencies. Outside, the world sounded normal: birds, wind, laughter. And yet, I don't know how long this will last, he said quietly. Neither do I, she admitted, sitting beside him. But we found this one. That means something. Do we stay, or keep looking? She was quiet for a moment. Then, this version. We stay. At least for a while. Elias nodded. He reached for the journal on the bedside table. The pages were blank. For the first time in months, it wasn't he writing ahead of him. That night, they lay beneath the stars, her head on his chest. He whispered, "Why us? Why do we remember?" She traced a circle on his skin. Because we chose to. Because something in us couldn't forget. Most people don't. Most people can't. He looked up at the sky. The constellations were unfamiliar. New names, new shapes. I think the timelines shift because of choices, he said. Not machines. Not accidents. But because we want different endings. Even if we don't know it. She nodded. Somewhere, versions of us gave up. But not here. And that was it. No grand explanation. No machines, no villain, no master plan. Just the universe, a canvas in motion, a story constantly rewritten by desire, memory, grief, and love. Some nights, Elias still felt the ripple. Still sensed another version of himself reaching out in the dark. But now, he wrote back. He wrote messages in the journal not for himself, but for them, for the versions of him still searching. For the ones on the edge of breaking. Keep going. You'll find her. The timelines remember. And maybe, just maybe, they would. In a world where time was water, love became the stone, constant, unwavering, shaping the river with its presence. And so the story never truly ended. It just flowed on.